Hello, my name is Rob, and welcome to Directors Uncut, Season 2 of Directors Uncut. And on this podcast, we put filmmakers from all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from Iranian minimalism to Bollywood spectaculars. Then we turn it into a lottery of directors by using a random number generator to pick a name out of the hat. Whatever name comes out, myself and a rotating cast of guest hosts discuss them and their work through 2 films. This week I've been joined by Graham. Hello there.
Hello.
And Andy. Hi there.
Hiya.
And it had to be a big name for the first episode of Season 2. I don't know whether this is the one I was expecting, because this episode is Michael Moore.
Yeah, I mean, saying that Michael Moore was divisive is a statement that's staggeringly obvious, but I think he's divided you and me before, hasn't he, Rob?
I'm not sure, has he?
I won't put words in your mouth. I remember you not being a fan.
Yeah, it was probably in, I don't know. I've said a lot of things over the years, you know. You hope people remember none of them, but there we go. Yeah, let's just open it up with it's a hard question to ask, because he's another one of these directors who's been around seemingly forever. But where did you both first hear about Michael Moore?
For me, it was this movie. It was one of the movies that we're going to go and talk about. I should maybe caveat that with Bowling for Columbine. I was at an age where, so that came out 2002, wasn't it? So I was about 15. An age where you're kind of getting political leanings and finding out things that make you angry, and getting a kind of better understanding for, especially at that time, a kind of shit post 9/11 world. Which obviously Columbine was, that was 99 that happened, wasn't it? So it was pre 9/11.
I think.
Was it 2001?
I think it was
No, I think it's 99.
It was Clinton. Clinton was in charge when Columbine happened, because it was the same day that he dropped a silly amount of bombs on Syria,
more likely.
And so Clinton. So yeah, but anyway, yeah, it was them. It was just kind of that era of being angry and not realising why, and this kind of movie helped you find out why you were raging. It was that.
I imagine it's the same answer for you, Graham, but...
I think slightly earlier. I'd been dimly aware of him before this. I'd seen some episodes of The Awful Truth, the Channel 4 series he did, although I didn't see the one before it, TV Nation, which I've seen in retrospect, and that has an alarmingly young Louis Theroux among its correspondent roster.
He just came out of the womb looking like that. He was never young.
You'd be surprised, man. But yeah, I think this would certainly be the first one of his movies that I saw, definitely.
I think I was the same as Andy, really. I think Bowling for Columbine for me. It was just, it was one of those really incendiary movies at the right time, at the right place, with the right voice in it.
Yeah.
And it pissed off a lot of people, but we will get into that later, I assume.
We certainly will, yes.
So which one do you want to do first? The 2 movies we picked, and we try to have 2 movies that represent different aspects of a filmmaker's style. So Bowling for Columbine is one, and the other one we're doing, I should say, is his sole effort to tell a normal story. It's not a documentary, and that would be Canadian Bacon. So... Canadian Bacon or Bowling for Columbine? Which one do you want to tackle first, you two?
I enjoyed Canadian Bacon a lot more than I thought I was going to, so I'm happy to go with whatever, genuinely. If there's a positive or negative to end on, to kind of continue with, I'm quite happy.
Should we jump in on Canadian Bacon then, if that's... because I think that'll be the discovery for most people.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had no idea he'd done this sort of thing before.
Good evening. Edwin S. Simon reporting. NBS News has obtained Pentagon documents that show our neighbor to the north, the sovereign nation of Canada, has embarked on a military program aimed at the United States. Canada, known for ages as a polite and clean country, has, under a socialist majority, undertaken a massive military buildup on its border with the United States.
I don't like Canada. It's freezing cold.
Canada owns more of the U.S. than any other country.
The Canadians
They walk among us. William Shatner, Michael J. Fox, Monty Hall, Mike Myers, Alex Trebek. All of them Canadians. All of them here.
Is Canadian Prime Minister Clark MacDonald a member of a satanic cult?
Most of Canada's vast military technology has been built and supplied by the United States. The Canadian National Tower in Toronto, erected to transmit nuclear attack warnings from radar stations in northern Canada, is now solely in Canadian hands. It is the height of 6 American football fields, or 5 Canadian football fields, as if Canadian football really counts. What would be the psychological motivation to erect a huge, long, rigid shaft?
Does somebody want to have a crack at the concept, the plot behind this one? Because it's a dense one.
There is quite a lot going on, yeah, but at the core of it, a major defence manufacturer is going bust because the Cold War's over and there is no one to bomb anymore. This is causing terrible knock-on problems with unemployment and suicides in the region where it was formerly based. So a group of people at the Pentagon decide to come up with a fictional war. They manufacture a war on the Canadian border, and it follows 2 characters played by John Candy and Rhea Perlman, who were sort of good Foursquare patriots who, as good Foursquare patriots, find themselves being utterly conned into participating into this ridiculous, non-existent war.
Yeah. As good of a description as you're ever going to get there, because there is a lot going on in this one.
There is.
The thing that stood out for me is I never knew that this was John Candy's final ever role.
Yeah,
which gives it a weird vibe, yeah.
It gave me a weird feeling when there's that joke about him like running to the top of the is it the CN Tower in Toronto? And it's not a great joke at the start of it, but knowing that the guy who was playing this joke died of a heart attack pretty soon afterwards, you think, oh yeah, could have shaved that one out, really, couldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, but you like this one, you were saying, Andy, so...
Well, I liked it a lot more than I expected I was going to. Like, I thought it was going to be... To be honest, having only seen Michael Moore documentaries up until now, and not having seen any of the TV shows or anything like that it was involved in, I didn't really have a feel for how it would be, but it's got quite similar humour to how he is in these documentaries, very similar humour to it, and also the kind of points it picks up on in terms of unemployment in the States and caused by a kind of broken military contract, obviously with the end of the Cold War, is very similar to how he kind of portrays Flint, Michigan in Columbine. So it was quite interesting to see that, I mean, this about 10 years between the two movies?
A bit less, yeah.
A bit less.
7, 8.
Bacon's kind of mid-90s, I think, yeah.
But it's still the same themes that are carrying on, and that was something I'll kind of come back to when we go into Columbine, but... yeah, I had good fun with it. I thought John Candy was great in it. Good cameos from likes of Rip Torn and...
Oh man, Rip Torn.
He's great in it. And Dan Aykroyd having a brief kind of appearance. There's just loads of great wee bits in it, but it was a unwasted 100 minutes.
It's surprisingly fun. You don't picture Michael Moore with this phase of American comedy sort of started mid-80s until the 90s, and that crew of Saturday Night Live as like Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray and all these people. You don't really associate that with the guy who made Bowling for Columbine, so it took me a bit of a time thing. Hang on, am I supposed to find bits of this funny? Is this a comedy? I'm not sure what's going on here.
Well, it also starts with probably the bleakest stretch of the film, which is Kevin J. O'Connor's character, who's just been laid off from this massive defence contractor. He's gonna jump off a dam, which is dark enough as an opening for a film, but it does lead you to suspect that he's about to assassinate the president. And I am I am kind of loath to say, oh, you couldn't get away with that these days, but Jesus, you couldn't get away with that these days, could you?
Well, no, I mean, there's a gag off that says if the policeman stops a potential suicide from jumping, you get $25, but if they jump, you get $50.
Yes.
At the bottom, it's got Rhea Perlman and John Candy just begging people to shout.
Yeah, that was so. I didn't even look into this movie at all until I never read a synopsis or anything. Didn't look at the cast list. So then the first point where I realised John Candy was in this is when he's telling a guy at the top of Niagara Falls to jump.
Yeah,
He's just saying jump, because he wants the extra money. And it's like, how many have we got this week? Well, that's 9. This will be 9 after this, like $450. Yeah. It's really it's dark humour, but it was really good.
Oh yeah. It's very surprising though. I mean, it's not subtle in any way, shape, or form politically, is it? It's clearly by the same man who has a huge axe to grind.
And although I think there are things that don't quite work in it, I think politically it remains absolutely on the money. I think that the critique of the American defence industry, at some point doesn't someone, maybe it's Alan Alda as the president, doesn't he say, well, you can't just have a war against terrorism? It's like, well, yeah, actually, turns out you can.
Yeah, he's very well cast in this as well. I mean, just across the board, it's an excellent cast.
Fabulous cast. Alda, I think, is inspired a bit by Peter Sellers' as president in Doctor Strangelove, where he's not a ridiculous guy. He's just too much of a nice liberal to be any use in this situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was great in it. The kind of where he's introduced and Rip Torn's wanting to start fights with anyone that's kind of crossing the president, and he doesn't understand why he's not getting the kind of great backing from the crowd that are there at the weapons auction where they're selling like surface to air missiles for $25. And is it Hacker's the name of the company, isn't it? Hacker President, Hacker Defense, and he's the head of Hacker Defense is furious because all these weapons are just getting bought up for pennies, and it's just the what's the actor's name? Sorry, the president again. I forgot to write that down. Alan Alda. He's great in it throughout. Like he's just this kind of meek, wilting guy who doesn't have any sort of real power, who is trying to find a way to gain some sort of traction with American people. And I mean, he fails at every turn, but he gets help basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think most MVP has to be Rip Torn. He's this
Rip
character.
Torn is the MVP in most movies he's in my books. Yeah. What a guy!
He's playing this character who you see a lot in sort of political thrillers, the sort of military advisor to a political leader. But he takes it to sort of, I mean, even this sort of comedy exaggeration of this character, it's been done many, many times before. It's just the absolute glee of which he says everything sadistic. With that voice, it's a thing of beauty, honestly. He's hilarious in every scene he's in.
Yeah. It reminded me kind of the sort of army general in Mars Attacks.
Yeah.
Where everything's very over. Obviously, this would have been before Mars Attacks, wouldn't it have?
At the same time.
At the same time. Yeah, they're very similar type of characters who just go for a kind of extreme reaction first and then see what will happen. Although, in saying that, he's very much against fighting the Russians, isn't he? He's the one that... Does he want to fight the Russians? It's kind of torn a wee bit.
I think he calls them soft for surrendering.
There's some nuance to him. It's like there are real villains in this movie, but they tend to be on the more corporate side of things, the defence contractors. Torn he's playing a ridiculous guy, but there's some humanity to him, I think.
Oh, yeah. He's very funny, though. I mean, just the way he says lines is, I'd happily beat both of you to death. Just the way he says this stuff. Yeah, he's excellent.
Yeah.
I honestly think it falls to pieces a little bit in the second half.
I think there's some very good stuff in the second half, but I think it suffers from the fact that the film doesn't quite decide. It doesn't seem to have quite settled on how it wants you to see Boomer, the John Candy character. Like, on the one hand, he is a grotesque kind of ugly American jingoist, and this is a political comedy about war, so he's kind of a bad guy, but I feel like casting John Candy and focusing on the relationship he has with his wife is almost kind of hedging your bets. Moore doesn't seem to know how likeable or unlikable he wants this character to be, and the more it starts to rest on his shoulders, it becomes more uneven for me, I think.
It is a degree of colourblind. Well, I don't know whether that's the right phrase. I can't think of a phrase to be accurate, but nationality blind casting.
Yes.
John Candy is Canadian.
That is quite cute, actually, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that Dan Aykroyd's American, and he plays a very, very, very broad Canadian in a cameo.
Aykroyd's Canadian, isn't he?
I'm not sure. I always thought he was American.
I mean, obviously I'm British, so I can't tell the difference between Americans and Canadians.
No, he's Canadian too. I think just everybody that got to play in this they're all Canadian.
The best American actors are Canadians. Like
Yes.
Ryan Reynolds. Is Ryan Gosling, is he Canadian?
Yeah, both Ryans. Canada is one of the biggest exports of Ryans.
My wife says yes, and she'll be an expert on that. Yeah. It's the kind of the end part is where it's at its weakest. Like, it kind of just almost set piecey. Like, and I did lose a bit of interest in it once it gets away from the more, I say intrigue, but the more
the Machiavellian stuff, I think, is the good stuff.
Yeah, once it starts getting into John Candy trying to like black out the Canadians' electricity and it's things like that. I just kind of lost a wee bit of traction with it, but
it's like that line, isn't it? When it's absurd, grotesque characters manipulating people, it shouldn't be funny, but it is because the people who are doing it are so absurd and they're so grotesque. But when you get scenes like an elderly couple knitting the guards for the entire national grid for Canada,
and they're really proud of that fact as well.
It's that line, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bit National Lampoonsy. I don't know if that's like a legitimate complaint, but National Lampoons, it was like such diminishing returns. When it was good, it was great, but when it was bad, it was sort of just tacky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think part of what Moo was trying to do is to sort of Trojan horse something that's quite subversive into the framework of a kind of National Lampoon-y style comedy, but in the end, despite having a lot of good stuff in it, it does just tip over a bit for me.
It felt kind of like a proto-Mallrats for me. The style of comedy of it, like slapsticky and situations where certain characters shouldn't be in, and like Kevin Smith at his, maybe, depending on your thoughts on Mallrats, worst. I like Mallrats, but it's not one of his kind of more well-renowned and well-thought-of movies. But I felt like there was a definitely Kevin Smith style to it. Not as clever in terms of it's the kind of language used in the script and things like that, but to his lesser extent, I would think, and not as vulgar, obviously.
Is it just because Kevin Smith has been obsessed with Canada for the past decade or so?
Could be that as well.
He did a Canada trilogy, didn't he? Starting with Tusk, and the world just ignored it after that, I think.
Was it Red State? Was that Canada?
No, that's very American. That's definitely.
That was, so it was. Yeah. Of course it is.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's such a weird outlier for his career.
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, I can't. Maybe it's just because I know it didn't happen, but I can't imagine a world where he would go more heavily into fiction directing. I think there's always a part of him that wants to be a pamphleteer, to see something happening in the news and then, fine, making a film about it. And documentaries, obviously, the best way to make those films. But I don't think it's a disaster, which you would think, looking at it as his only fictional film, you would think it might be a disaster. Mm-hmm. But it's got some good stuff in it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I doubt he would do another fiction movie, but he certainly has the gift for it.
Like, personally, I wouldn't watch it again. I don't think it's not
No.
one I'll ever go back to. But it certainly, as I said, it wasn't as. I'd really expected it to be awful, like bordering on unwatchable. And seeing John Candy turn up, I was kind of like, oh, maybe this will be okay. And it was, it was completely. I think saying passable is a bit harsh on it because it was fun. It was a good, fun movie to watch.
For me, this era of comedy is, well, I can watch them all at any time, really, even if they're like the worst of the worst, because they're always fun, they're always cheeky and entertaining. And I think this is sort of the last hurrah for this style of comedy, because not long after, you got the rise of sort of frat comedy with your American Pies and your gross out humour. This sort of very, very pointed, very, very satirical, but cheeky sort of Saturday Night Live sketch comedy style. This is one of the sort of final throws. Yeah.
I mean, for all it has some very, very dark moments. It is a PG. I don't remember much swearing in it. There's a sort of innocence about it, even at its most cynical, which is weird.
Yeah. But interesting movie.
I think you can see maybe the kind of, as you're saying, with the kind of gross outs coming in. So it was 99 would have been American Pie. So about 3-4 years later. I think you can see the first American Pie isn't, there is elements of gross out, but it's certainly not as gross as the rest of them go.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that slow change from this style of comedy into that. And American Pie is the kind of point where it's in between the first American Pie.
It stuck its foot in the gross out door, and everything that came after it sort of just smashed it wide open.
Stuck its dick in the gross out pie. But
well, I'm going to go with
for that.
That works. Okay, so any final thoughts on Canadian bacon? I mean, as a male, I don't know. I've never had Canadian bacon willingly, so it might be okay. But the movie.
Maple syrup. Coated bacon, it's good.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
it literally hurts at the time I've tried it, but yeah, I would. Do you know what? If you're a completionist for Michael Moore, or if you just like an easy watch, I would give it a go. But it was
absolutely.
Fine. Yeah.
100万ある。これお前にやる。その代わり俺に付き合え。付き合うって何に？東京散歩。え？
And on that, I think we should pick who's next.
I think we should, yes.
How many have we got? We have... Yes, 417. So, random number generator, 1 to 417, comes out with director 344. Good, I don't have to scroll too much for this one. 344 is somebody I'm going to have to look up.
Oh,
I don't know who it is. It's Satoshi Miki. So let's look it up.
No idea. Wow, brave new world that we're going into. It's an educational podcast.
Writer, director. Okay. Instant Swamp, I think, is the most popular one. Japanese filmmaker who does sort of quirky indie comedies.
Okay.
All right.
Just Instant Swamp. This is sort of maybe puts a flavour of the director in your mind, but a quirky young woman who loves antiques and embarks on risky adventures and business endeavours with her eccentric friends, trying to score a unique item that will finally be worth a huge profit after her sacrificed savings or to open up a new shop. Whoever wrote the IMDb listing just needs to, maybe dawned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm impressed by some of his film titles, including Louder, Can't Hear What You're Singing, Wimp from 2018. And his latest film, What to Do with the Dead Kaiju.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
That is
it's a side of a genre no one's ever really looked at before.
And going back in his career, turtles swim faster than expected. Well, I don't know, really.
Was that...
Yeah,
Turtles are surprisingly fast swimmers. Was that released on Third Window?
I'm glad. Yeah, I've just clicked on the Wikipedia link, and yeah, it's got the third Windows cover as the DVD cover.
Suzume Katagura is a bossed housewife who spends her days doing chores and taking care of her husband's pet turtle, as you do. One day she sees a wanted ad for spies. Hoping to get some excitement, she decides to give them a call. Okay, that's where we're going with this.
This sounds pretty great, actually.
Yeah, you could make a whole podcast just reading synopsises from Satoshi Miki films.
So there we go. Satoshi Miki, one of the first episodes of season 2. Looking forward to that. That's really, that's out of my comfort zone. I know Japanese cinema, but quirky Japanese cinema, that's an entirely new ball game we're getting into there.
Now it's time for a brief history of the United States of America. Hi, boys and girls, ready to get started? Once upon a time, there were these people in Europe called pilgrims, and they were afraid of being persecuted. So they all got in a boat and sailed to the New World where they wouldn't have to be scared ever again.
Oh, I'm so relaxed. I feel so much safer.
But as soon as they arrived, they were greeted by savages, and they got scared all over again. So they killed them all. Now, you'd think wiping out a race of people would calm them down, but no. Instead, they started getting frightened of each other. Witch! So they burned witches. In 1775, they started killing the British so they could be free. And it worked, but they still didn't feel safe. So they passed a Second Amendment which said every white man could keep his gun. I loves my gun. Loves my gun. Which brings us to the genius idea of slavery. You see, boys and girls, the white people back then were also afraid of doing any work. So they went to Africa, kidnapped thousands of black people, brought them back to America, and forced them to work very hard for no money. And I don't mean no money like I work at Walmart and make no money. I mean $0. Nothing. Not a zip. Doing it that way made the USA the richest country in the world. So did having all that money and free help calm the white people down? No way. They got even more afraid. That's because after 200 years of slavery, the black people now outnumbered the white people in many parts of the South. Well, you can pretty much guess what came next. The slaves started rebelling. There were uprisings, and old master's heads got chopped off. And when white people heard of this, they were freaking out and going, I want to live. Don't kill me, big black man. Well, just in the nick of time came Samuel Colt, who in 1836 invented the first weapon ever that could be fired over and over without having to reload. And all the southern whites were like, yeah! But it was too late. The North soon won the Civil War and the slaves were freed. Yep, they were free now to go chop all the old master's heads off. And everybody was like, oh no, we're gonna die. But the freed slaves took no revenge. They just wanted to live in peace. But you couldn't convince the white people of this. So they formed the Ku Klux Klan. And in 1871, the same year the Klan became an illegal terrorist organization, another group was founded, the National Rifle Association. Soon politicians passed one of the first gun laws, making it illegal for any black person to own one. It was a great year for America, the KKK and the NRA. Of course, they had nothing to do with each other, and this was just a coincidence. One group legally promoted responsible gun ownership, and the other group shot and lynched black people. And that's the way it was all the way to 1955, when a black woman broke the law by refusing to move to the back of the bus. White people just couldn't believe it. Why won't she move? What's going on? Man, all hell broke loose. Black people everywhere started demanding their rights, and white people had a major freaky fear meltdown, and they were all like, run away! Run away! And they did. They all ran fleeing to the suburbs where it was all white and safe and clean. And they went out and bought 250 million guns and put locks on the doors, alarms in the houses, and gates around the neighborhoods. And finally, they were all safe and secure and snug as a bug. And everyone lived happily ever after.
So, we will jump into the second movie of the day, and the one which we mentioned earlier, which brought him his notoriety, 2002's Ballin' for Columbine. It's kind of hard to synopsize this one because it's not really a plot. It's more...
Argument, right? Not a plot, but an argument, I think.
Yeah, it's an argument presented from numerous directions. It starts off with a school shooting in Columbine and just sort of completes the image that surrounds that and explains things around that and why America is like this or what have you. It's a very complete argument as a documentary.
Yeah, it's. I think looking at it is following on from quite a few years of turmoil in the States. Michael Moore's looking at a way of addressing why there is so much gun violence is maybe the best way to kind of look at it. I mean, it's I'll stop there because I was going to go on a bit of a rant, but
I mean, I think the thing I haven't seen this before because I did have a big chip on my shoulder. I did not like Michael Moore, and I cannot remember why. I'm absolutely honest. But this was made last week, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's frighteningly evergreen.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever seen a documentary like that before.
I think for me, watching it again made me think that there are two questions you can ask about a Michael Moore documentary's facts. And the first one is, is he right? Is the information in the documentary correct? And since it's come out, there's been claim and counterclaim about some of the things that are in it. But the other one is, no, is he correct? And the answer to the second one is obviously yes. It's like, I remember when there was that endless back and forth about this when it came out, and some people were saying, he's fudged the chronology a bit on the NRA meeting. It wasn't straight after Columbine. I don't know if it was or it wasn't. There's so much, back and forth over that. But the NRA do that now. They had a big rally in Texas just after the Uvalde shooting. So, it's hard to object to their portrayal there when you know that even if they didn't do it then, they would go on to do it over and over again in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting. When I was going through my rewatch, I messaged a few of my schoolmates who I think I went to see this with them in the cinema when it came out.
Yeah.
And I was watching it just saying, they are using the same excuses 20 years ago that they were using 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It is movies, it's violent movies, it's violent video games, it's religion not getting taught in schools, it's racial segregation. It's incredible. 20 years later, you're still talking about the same things, and they still go back to the same point, and they never, you see these fucking idiots like Ted Cruz and whatever other fucking hick that is in support of the NRA and the gun laws in the States, that they've got this tunnel vision that it doesn't matter about, how are we going to prevent kids from getting killed in schools? Let's add more guns, or let's add more police. There's 40% of the Uvalde, I forget how to say the town's name, Uvalde.
I'm saying it with confidence, but with no actual expertise.
Like 40% of the town's budget is on police, and the police stood back and went, fuck that, we're not going in there, that guy's got a gun. Like, and 20 years ago, Michael Moore was talking about this, and let's be honest, it's fucking Republicans. Like, you can't. Yes, Democrats have gun licenses, and Democrats have the Democrats are members of the NRA, and there's Democrats that go into Walmart and buy, alongside their chicken, buy 6 rounds for a fucking M16 or whatever type of guns they have.
Worse than that, if you open a bank account in one scene depicted here, you get a rifle if you open a bank account with a certain brand.
It's a great example, I think, of Moore's ability to sweeten the really horrific stuff with a joke, because the end of that section is just him asking, do you think it's a bit dangerous to hand out guns in a bank? Which always gets a massive laugh, but it is a horrifying idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And him himself, he's an NRA member, and he's
upfront about that, isn't it? He said,
right from the off, right?
Yeah, he doesn't hide it.
No.
Which is the right thing to do, I think.
Yeah. But you're not hunting deer with a semi-automatic.
It's not very sparsing, is it?
No.
There's some things in this that I'd forgotten about that I thought are really staggeringly effective, really interesting. I mean, the stuff about... Because it's not just a movie about guns. He acknowledges that there are other countries that have as many guns as America. What they don't seem to have is as much gun crime. And he sort of examines the media and the way that the media creates a society where people are terrified that their own neighbours will kill them. And that's really effective, because all the evidence he needs is in the public. He just needs to edit it.
You just turn on the news. That's the angle that he goes with, that this is going to kill you. If stuff that you won't know will save your life. the media presents everything that it's debating and this do it or die sort of mentality. So he presents a very, very good argument of basically a country on fire.
Yeah. And yeah, it's they talk about, like, there's a lot of when you're going on about the news and the media, and he speaks to the creator of Cops, which is essentially promoting racial segregation.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've cancelled that show, haven't they?
I'm assuming. I mean, years ago, I maybe saw a few episodes, but it was said to him, "Why don't you chase a guy who's stolen millions from the public purse?" Well, that wouldn't be as good. What's better do you want to see a white guy running down Hollywood Boulevard, Fifth Avenue or something, and getting chased by the police? Or do you want to see a black guy with his top off running through the streets at night in some slum? He says that makes better TV. And it's calculated racial segregation. It's what they've done in the States for years in certain areas.
Like 1920s.
Yeah. And it's done and it's amplified
media,
by media anyway. I mean, I don't know how often you have seen Fox News, but like
every time they say something like more stupid than usual, I'm made aware of it.
Yeah. I remember one time I was in Thailand and the only English channel was Fox News.
Yeah.
It was on the TV and I watched it, and like, it's all Murdoch and it's all run by this guy who has his own agenda, and he's starting to bring it into the UK as well, which is really worrying.
Yeah.
And I think it was Hannity was the guy's name, and the amount of coverage this guy was getting, and the amount of just nonsense, like not even fact. News in America doesn't need to be fact; it just needs to be loud enough.
Yeah. It's all opinion led, and it's like one of the things that I found slightly heartening. One of the few things I found heartening about British politics recently is that every time someone starts a new news outlet, whether it's GB News or Talk TV or anything like that, they always think, "Oh yeah, the public will want more opinion," and they put it out and it dies on their arse because newspaper owners understand that you use the opinion pieces as kind of a bit of propaganda that's snuck under the door. People buy a newspaper, find out who won the football last night, see what's on telly last night, maybe see a bit of the headlines, and all of the really poisonous shit just gets absorbed passively. And it's like, I can understand how that's a good propaganda model, but I'm not going to turn on my TV to watch Tom Newton Dunn with his fucking radar dish ears rambling on about nothing. Why would I want to do that?
Or the guy that used to be the showbiz editor for The Sun, Dan Wootton, who's now a political correspondent on GB News, and you're sitting going, oh, honestly,
not ready for prime time, is he?
No, he's really not. He's not ready for any fucking time. The man's a massive, massive bell end. And he's so stupid as well. He's not clever. That's the thing about these people as well. They've got so much conviction in their idiocy.
Yeah, they've got a kind of debating society smart where you can just sort of come out with some bullshit confidently and move the conversation on if it flops, but there's no actual analytical skill there.
I see what's happening here. You turn it into a political podcast. Swerve this car a little bit. It's very easy to do it because we're so alike. I mean, just on that, just to find a
political movie. It's a political documentary.
Oh yeah, the fact that Piers Morgan went off to do his own thing on a channel had a great first week, and then I think it's about 10,000 people were watching.
Lost 90% of its audience, according to the latest Pop Bitch newsletter, which couldn't happen to a nicer side of ham.
Yeah, but he has a habit of he presents the facts in a very sobering way, but he also gets to the humanity of the story. There's some really, really horrible moments that just really bring into focus how sort of hopeless this situation is.
I'm assuming you're not meaning Piers Morgan and you're meaning Michael Moore. You were talking about Piers Morgan and then went on. Piers, he makes some good points.
No. But it's like the bit where he interviews Charlton Heston. That's almost unwatchable because of how horrible it is. He says, look at this picture of this 6-year-old girl that was shot by a 6-year-old boy, and the shutters go down.
The devastating bit of the Heston interview to me is just before it, where he has that interview with the teacher who, that incident happened in her class, and it cuts straight to Heston on stage at the NRA convention with his cold dead hands line. It's like, I know that's a manipulative cut. I know I'm being manipulated, but in that moment, I just fucking hated Charlton Heston. I think it's a brutally effective piece of editing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, these don't think that. I think that's the thing that this movie sort of gets to the heart of. None of this stuff exists in a vacuum.
Yeah,
it's all influencing each other. It's all manipulation upon manipulation. Whereas I think it's Marilyn Manson says, "I'm blamed for all this sort of stuff." I mean, he's a horrible person.
That maybe hasn't dated quite as well, but still.
But what he says is nobody's asked these kids about what they think, about what they feel. It's all blaming it on guns, on movies, on TV shows and video games, but never talking to the kids.
It's the Marilyn Manson thing. I made a note of it, and I remember being really taken aback by when I first saw this movie, the way he spoke, because I never knew really much about Marilyn Manson apart from the image. And yes, now what you've heard, how he is, he's a horrible, horrible bastard. He'll get to jail maybe. I don't know what will happen to him. He'll pay a fine probably is what will happen over there. But at the time, he was making really good points. Like he said, I'm being blamed for violence in Columbine because they listen to Marilyn Manson. But what else has been forgotten about is there was more bombs dropped in a foreign country than ever had been dropped that day. Everyone forgot about Monica Lewinsky is one of the lines he uses as well. And he says, and then they turn the focus onto me because I look different. And that is what it was. And these guys, as you were saying, Rob, like no one asked them. And I think Michael Moore says, what would you say to those boys? He says, I wouldn't say anything. I'd ask them what they think or what they are feeling.
Moments like that.
I think that's maybe simplifying their mindset a wee bit in terms of how they viewed the world at the point. I mean, there was a thing where there was a cut for a news report, and it says the guys, the two killers had fantasized about flying a plane into New York, and this was 1999. Wow.
Yeah,
and it's so there's weird kind of mirror images, maybe the wrong type of phrase, but it's
certainly quite predictive, isn't it?
Yeah,
it wasn't a comfortable watch in 2002, but there are bits of it that are uncanny now. I mean, particularly at the start of it, where he's talking to the Michigan militia set up in his home state, and it's like on the one hand, I mean, I was around in the 90s. I remember that every other week there was a documentary about some American militia. It was just one of those sort of cows that documentarians were milking all the time. But there's an uncanny moment in this, and I think even back then, Muan knew that this was something important, where these guys are asked, why they're like retreating to the woods and arming themselves and preparing for war. Why are you doing this? And one of the militia members says, well, when it all kicks off, who's gonna protect your kids? Do you think the cops are gonna do that? And of course, you watch this after, as you said, Andrew, the Uvalde shooting, and you think, yeah, they're not, are they? And that has a whole different resonance. Now, I don't think I picked up on that when I first watched it, because I think I was still in that mindset of, oh yeah, these guys are cranks. But
they are too. But
probably are cranks, but still, that moment is quite eerie, I think.
And it just, that segment just shows how broken, I guess, America is. That there's these people out in the sticks. I don't know where it was. I think it was in Michigan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They're so disillusioned with everything that they don't trust anybody. And that's just sort of an icon for everything that the documentary goes on to say, how the news media is so manipulative and corrupt. How it fosters this sort of environment of fear across the country that these little groups are inevitable.
Yeah.
And the way that guns are so readily available. He does many bits where it shows just how easy it is to get a gun. The bank bit is one of them. And there's a scene later on with some survivors of Columbine that he goes to the headquarters of Kmart with.
That's a great bit.
Just to prove a point, the kids say, "Oh, we should go and get some bullets." So they go to the local Kmart and buy all of the bullets. No problem. Not a bit of grief whatsoever.
Well, they're returning the merchandise, aren't they? That's the rationale behind it. They still have bullets from Columbine lodged in their body, so they're returning it to the store where the shooters bought it, which is just a savage, brilliant idea, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what he does well is he shows a few kind of, talking about the militia earlier on, he also has, is it James Nichols near the start? The brother of the Omaha bombing.
Ah, yes.
And that guy is on a different level for the militia. Like he is, he's talking about he's an anarchist, and I think he uses. There's a lot of cracks out there when he talks about a lot of cranks out there when he talks about why he keeps a Magnum under his pillow.
Yeah,
and then it goes.
He
to
does
that
as well.
and he does. Yeah, he shows. We don't see it, but he shows that. One of the things I thought, going back to the media, was kind of when they're reporting on the 6-year-old getting murdered by the classmate, and it's the kind of behind the scenes of the actual media. How blasé they are about it. Like the guy's talking about his hair and everything. There's no kind of somberness at all about it. It's just so.
There's like a great shot there where the cameraman just walks past all of the camera crews stood there. And the narrator, Michael Moore, says if he just went a few blocks over the other way, they'd understand why this keeps on happening. So it's got like a shot with the circus and the reality at the same time, which I think it's the only way you can really tell a story like this.
Mm-hmm. A bit about the mum of the I say murderer, but obviously not murderer, but the 6-year-old who shot, who had 2 jobs, and it was an hour-and-a-half drive there, an hour-and-a-half drive back, and poverty. That's what, as we were saying earlier on, talking about Canadian bacon. It's quite a through line in a lot of his movies, documentaries, going back to why there is this level of tragedy.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that bit with the mother of the kid always gets overshadowed and left behind when people talk about this film. And I do think, if someone was trying to ask me, all right, what's good about Michael Moore? You agree with him, yeah, but what's actually cinematically good about Michael Moore? You could show them that clip, because it's just beautifully constructed, compassionate journalism. And I think it's an undervalued strength of his.
Yeah.
So, any closing thoughts on Bowling for Columbine?
I just wanted to bring up the animation scene in it, which I thought was great. I don't know who done that, because obviously you have Matt Stone early on a wee bit. Is it Matt Stone, Trey Parker? Matt Stone, yeah. I don't know if it's them that done that, but the animation is very South Parkish. I thought that was great. Like, basically it's a history of white American paranoia.
Yes.
Is essentially what it is. It's like the Pilgrims were scared of the English, so they moved to America, and then they were scared of the Native Americans, so they shot them, and then they get scared of each other, and then they get scared of the black, and it's a fantastic, or parody is maybe the wrong word, but summing up really about why there can be the issues there is. I thought that's one of the highlights of it as well. There's just lots of great scenes, again, I keep using the wrong word, but great summing up of the issues that there is.
Yes. Graham?
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's some tremendous material in it, and the stuff that hasn't aged well is far outnumbered by the stuff that has. And just every time I see Moore's films, I'm always reminded of how skillful he is at constructing a documentary narrative. He gets talked about as just a rabble-rouser, but I think certainly in the years after Fahrenheit 9/11, a lot of people tried to do their own kind of Michael Moore film, and nobody did it as well. And I think it is worth studying for that reason alone.
Yeah, I just want to make one last point about the Charlton Heston thing as well. I never really mentioned anything about that as much. It's an argument that the gun holders or the people that want to have guns in the States always use, and they always fall back on the same thing. They mention the Second Amendment, which is the first thing they say, well, I've got a right to bear arms. I said, but why do you want to have them? And say, well, why is there more? Because he's talking about the violence in America, and then Heston then goes, well, we've got a lot of blood in our hands in the States. He says, no, but what about Germans? What about the Brits?
The Brits, yeah.
What about them? Oh, well, we've got mixed ethnicity, and it's the same bullet points that they always go back to, these guys that want to have their guns for protection. And this is obviously an audio medium, so you can't see the quotation marks, but
I think you can hear them, though, in a strange way.
Yeah, protection, yeah. It's something they always go back to, and obviously Heston took that on that interview on because Michael Moore mentioned, I'm an NRA member, so he would have went, oh, brilliant, propaganda for the NRA, and he just got totally jumped on. It was great. I think it's the best thing that Michael Moore's done, personally, is the Heston interview.
It's fearless documentary making that interview.
Yeah. I just wanted to make that point because I kind of I forgot to mention it at the time, but it's the typical response when people get questioned about their gun ownership is what they always go back on, and the violence in America.
Yeah. So, Michael Moore as a director, I'll have to lean on you two for this one because honestly, these are the only two I've seen.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to make an assessment with two very, very different but still incredibly politically charged movies. But you two seem to have experienced more of them. So, as a director, what do you two think?
I think Canadian Bacon aside, I think you need to keep that on its own because it is so. Yes, there's similar humour to how he makes his documentaries, but it really is a kind of standalone feature. In terms of his documentary filmmaking, I think Columbine was his best. I think Columbine is probably the best documentary that's ever been made, personally, over whatever genre you want to cover. I just think it's so well made. The horrible points it has to tackle are done with a lot of heart and a lot of the right trigger points. That, as I said, for me, at an age where I was politically inactive, and I'm still fairly politically inactive, but it made me realise what angers me. And I think documentary-wise, he's not been better. He has made great documentaries as well. In terms of Fahrenheit 9/11 was really good, possibly retreading a wee bit of some of the Columbine stuff. I think Sicko is great.
That's one I haven't seen. I must get around.
So Sicko's all about. It focuses on the healthcare, but it's also a lot about the victims of 9/11 who were like the fallout victims, like the inhalation from the dust and the smoke and everything, and them being denied healthcare through the US system and going to Cuba to get support. And he takes them to Cuba basically for their healthcare, where they couldn't afford the healthcare they wanted here. In the States, so if we give it time, it'll probably here as well. They couldn't afford it in the States, so he took them to Cuba to get the inhalers they needed, the oxygen machines they needed, and it's a really interesting look into the American healthcare system. I think he's an excellent documentary maker. As I said, Bowling for Columbine is the epitome of, and is the bar that is for kind of political documentaries in any documentary for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's doing this has persuaded me to go back and rewatch some of his work because I'd seen most of it when it came out. But there's always a trap you fall into with Moore, into thinking that he's a topical filmmaker. And he is, obviously. He makes movies about things that are current right now. But you can also point to a lot of things like Sicko and like a lot of the things in Bowling for Columbine where he is significantly ahead of issues that people would only start talking about years later. And, you can even see it in Canadian Bacon. For all that the comedy is hit and miss, the actual political points of Canadian Bacon haven't really aged. There is still this massive problem that the defence industry has an outsized place in America and Britain's economy because national security is the one thing that you can't outsource. And, that creates its own problems that, it's like Eisenhower said in his farewell speech, it could get to the point where you have to go to war, otherwise what are you spending all this money for? So I think it's interesting to look back on these films and look at things. Yes, things where you can say, oh, that's very 2002. I remember people were talking about that then. But it makes me admire him even more to recognise all the ways in which he was significantly ahead of the curve. I mean, who in the American media was talking about healthcare in 2007?
Wasn't a thing.
I just do not remember that being on the cards at all. Yeah.
For me, just quick statement, but I think it's very easy to be a political documentarian and batter people with hard-hitting points with a hammer. But I think it's very, very hard to be a political filmmaker and be just as powerful by having a light touch.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get wrong. And that Michael Moore has managed that, I think, is a credit to his skill as a storyteller, skill as a journalist.
Yeah.
Whether the success, I don't know, but off the back of these two, that is his greatest contribution as a director, I think.
So I know you were saying, Rob, before that you'd put off watching this for so long.
I honestly can't remember.
Aye. But what did you think then?
I thought it's an excellent documentary. It's just very alarming sort of shifts in tone.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of imitates the news, doesn't it? Where, or the morning breakfast shows, where it has a story about some illness or something. It's now we've got some stories of puppies. Let's go and see the puppies.
It's the Anchorman. It's like Anchorman. Here's Nutty the squirrel riding a wakeboard.
I think the way he's structured it, at least, is also a parody of the way that news is structured. It's serious, light, serious, light, serious, light, and you could call that tonal whiplash, but I think it's also kind of a statement at the same time.
Yeah, it's intentional.
It is, yeah.
Which is shrewd. Or maybe I'm just assigning him something which isn't really there, but that was my take on it, at least.
No, I think it's possibly true. My memory of Fahrenheit 9/11, which I do want to revisit sometime now, is that it has a much more linear kind of emotional arc. There's some funny stuff towards the beginning, and then it just gets darker and darker.
Yeah.
I think the structure of Bowling for Columbine is definitely very purposeful. I don't think there's anything in here that's accidental.
Yeah. Yeah, Fahrenheit 9/11's more about it's less news style and more conspiracy style, if I remember it rightly. It's been a while. It's more about the Saudis getting transported out of the States just after the planes hit. Then Bin Laden's family, I think it was, that get on the private jets out of the US before. It's more based around the kind of maybe he's not looking at it as much as paranoia and conspiracy theory, but he's certainly reporting on those theories at the time more than what this is purely factual and looking at the state of the States.
My main memory of Fahrenheit 9/11 is all the stuff in the second half about Iraqi civilian casualties, which is shatteringly dark.
Yeah.
And there have been documentaries made about this before, but I saw it at my local Cineworld, and it is a pretty sobering thing to see at your local Cineworld.
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
Thank you. Can you just stop stalling and answer the question? What is your third favorite movie of all time?
Paddington 2.
What? Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Paddington 2. Connect those dots. I mean, I don't want to be a snob, but...
I cried through the entire thing. It made me want to be a better man.
Bullshit, Mom! Paddington 2 is incredible.
I fucking told you.
So that brings us to the final part of the show, in which we talk about some of the other movies that you've been watching, aside from those by Michael Moore. So, who wants to have a crack first?
I've watched a lot since I was on last week. Sorry, I'll rephrase that, since I did the recording with you last week. I finally saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is in my top 2 of the year, alongside the Batman. But that's because I love Batman. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it, genuinely. It's so great. Like, I don't want to gush too much over it, but I've genuinely, and I was worried it was going to be a wee bit too long. It'd been kind of close to 2.5 hours, but it absolutely flew in. There's absolutely no fat on it. It's something you need to see to believe, I think. I also saw The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which
I still haven't got around to that.
It's just an absolute warm hug of a movie. Like, it's such a great buddy movie with Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage.
He's had a weird career trajectory, hasn't he?
Aye, definitely. But this takes it all on board. It's great. It's absolutely a must watch.
I do think Nicolas Cage is great, but probably not for the same reason that people usually say that. People usually cite his manic performances, but I think he's at his best when he's got the sort of warm characters like Raising Arizona. I think it's probably my favourite role of his because he's just brilliant in that.
Have you seen Pig?
I haven't, no.
Oh, he's fantastic in Pig. And that's really understated. Nicolas Cage, like, he's just playing this sombre guy that's gutted about losing his pig, but it's a bit more complicated than it sounds.
He had like his great era and then his divorce bill era, which I think people fell in love with the sort of the manic crap he was in. But he seems like he's come out the other side and he's gone back to making genuinely good roles and good movies.
I think what else I've been watching.
Something, and before we move on from The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, something Andrew said really intrigued me, where you said it was a buddy movie, and it suddenly struck me. When was the last time I saw a new buddy comedy? When was the last time one was at the cinema? I'm struggling.
Maybe Stretch, The Other Guys. Maybe
Step Brothers, The Other Guys,
or Nice Guys.
Yes, Nice Guys is very good. I like that movie.
That's quite a dark Shane Black, isn't it? But yeah,
I mean, I'll probably get Lynch for saying this, but Ryan Gosling cannot act drunk. I'm sorry, but he can.
Nice Guys is great. Oh, I look forward to his interpretation of Ken in the weird Greta Gerwig Barbie movie.
She literally seems to be doing Barbie in the multiverse of madness with that thing. It's absolutely bananas.
I watched something else this week and I can't remember. I rewatched Host just because it's great. I watched been watching The Boys and the first episode of Miss Marvel, which was fantastic. Actually, really good. Really enjoyed it.
Very, very important series, that, I think, just for representation.
Yeah, definitely. And it was good. It was really good, though. It wasn't just good because of representation.
Yeah,
it was actually really enjoyable. Kamala Khan, I don't know the exact name of the actress who plays her. She was fantastic in it. I've watched for the first time today the Hell House LLC Part 3. Don't know if any of you seen any of the Hell House LLC movies, the found footage movies.
There is one. There is one thing on. I think it's on Shudder, isn't it? There's one thing on Shudder today that I really want to see. Mad Dog,
God.
is it called?
Mad God.
Is that Shudder?
Mad God. Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's the Phil Tippett.
Yeah,
Phil Tippett. Yeah,
I've seen that looks years making or something.
That looks like Dante's Inferno levels are fucked up, like the game Dante's Inferno. If you've ever played that,
well, no, I haven't. I was genuinely thinking that works as a comparison to like the 14th century epic poem. I think it still works as a comparison.
It looks along those lines, just all sorts of craziness. I watched something else and I can't remember what it was, so I'll take my leave at that.
Graham?
A couple of things I've watched that I think might be of interest to listeners. I finally got round to watching Titane, the Julia Ducournau film, which I was just head over heels for. I remember watching, I don't remember if we ever discussed Raw, but my feelings on Raw was that it's got some good stuff in it, but it ends just at the point where it's about to become great, and I was really frustrated by that.
Maybe that's a creative decision, because some directors are horrible trolls like that.
I think it's she definitely knows what she's doing, and I definitely didn't approve of it. But Titane starts at the exact level of madness that Raw ended on, and then just accelerates from there. It was amazing, and I would love to know how this role was pitched to Agatha Roussel, who had not acted in a feature film before this.
It's quite a full-on performance for her.
It's like, yeah, I can only compare it to like Harvey Keitel in Bad Lieutenant or Isabelle Adjani in Possession. It's that kind of absolutely everything, full-on hysteria in every single scene kind of performance.
Well, I think he probably in when you drop the bit, says, a car will impregnate you in one scene. And that's the sort of, are you still on board or are you running out the room as quickly as you can moment?
It's probably true, yeah.
I wasn't on board, but I didn't run away. And it really wasn't for me. But I get why people like it, but it was
so divisive, yeah.
It wasn't. I really didn't like it, but
I mean,
it's just not for me.
What was he called? History of Violence. His name's completely farted on.
Cronenberg.
Not Dave Cronenberg. He was lead actor.
Oh, Viggo
Mortensen.
Viggo Mortensen is not a fan. He's went quite on record, yeah.
Viggo Mortensen was just going around the Cannes Film Festival starting beef with anyone who's crossed Cronenberg, which I think is adorable, by the way.
And Cronenberg says, I like it. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
Still not got a UK release for Crimes of the Future either.
Maddening, yeah. It's really harshing the buzz on my body horror summer that we don't have a release date for that.
Love that you have a name for it, though.
So some other things. I think one thing that I don't think we've ever had in the other things you've been watching section. We've had some TV, we've had some movies, lots of different stuff, but we've never done stand-up shows, have we? We've never had a stand-up comedy one.
Absolutely not, no, but please. I mean, it's hard to think of review comedy, though. I mean,
yeah,
it's just pointless at the end of the day, but what works for you works.
There's obviously a craft to it, but I also don't want to analyse it like that while I'm watching it. But I've never really been a big stand-up watcher, but I feel like there's a generation of comedians now where I know them off podcasts or panel shows, and I will happily describe myself as a fan of them despite never having seen their stand-up. And I just thought, that's a bit weird. You should do something about that. So I watched a show called Generation Boy Band Fan by the Danish comedian Sophie Haagen. Obviously, I'd been a big fan of them for the obvious reason that you'd be a fan of a comedian, which is I like listening to a podcast where she talks about true crime with the psychiatrist Dr. Julia Shaw, and so the normal way that people get into comedians. But I've never seen some of her stand-up. I really enjoyed it. It's a show built around her rediscovery of some erotic Westlife fan fiction that they wrote when they were 13, which is obviously a gold mine of humour. I particularly like their description of that they learned English from watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, so the Irish dialect in their fan fiction it's not great. It's not very authentic to the country and the culture.
I mean, I sympathise with that entirely. I mean, I haven't seen anything by James Acaster or Ed Gamble put a love off menu.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I've never seen Gamble stand up, but Acaster is a genius. I think his stand up is incredible.
Okay.
But Hagen, I admired that they managed to work in some quite dark material in it, because they also went through a lot of mental health problems as a teenager, as well as writing explicit stories about members of Westlife frotting each other, which, probably didn't help if I'm thinking about it. But they managed to incorporate some really sensitive and some really unsettling material about mental health into it in a way that doesn't kill the vibe at all, and I was really impressed by that.
Okay.
Stand up for me, I've watched most recently Scottish comic called Mark Nelson. Has his stand up, his first recorded stand up, free on YouTube. Right. I think it's called Don't Call It a Comeback, and it's good. It's kind of classic stand up style in a kind of local, well known comedy club called The Stand. And it's really good, worth checking out if we're talking about stand-ups.
Yeah, give that a watch.
It's free, why not?
yeah, the Sophie Haagen show I mentioned is free on YouTube as well. I think they released it like when the pandemic was on and all theatres were closed. So that it was a nice gesture.
Yeah.
Okay, so for myself, I'll start with the one which will probably get people to hate me, but Chungking Express from Wong Kar-wai. After I watched Fallen Angels, his 1995 film, it was my first Wong Kar-wai movie, absolutely head over heels in love with it. It's just aesthetic, its vibe, everything about it. It's when you watch a movie the first time, think, is this my favourite movie now? I think it is, you know. And then I found out that Chungking Express was the one that they did before it. That's sort of a prequel in the same universe.
Yeah, I think Fallen Angels was like, because Chungking Express is 2 stories, and I think originally Fallen Angels was one of the strands in Fallen Angels was going to be the 3rd story, but he said it felt too much like its own thing, so he cut it and made a different movie around it.
That one, well, Chungking Express is it's more about relationships of people who have mental health issues, and it seems really, really mental health issues stem from rejection, from just the way that Hong Kong is at that point in time. But it feels horrible to say this. The reason why I don't like it is because I didn't like the characters at all.
Yeah.
And on a movie which is basically you're following 4 characters, 2 characters in each half, around Hong Kong, shot handheld, getting in all the sights, and brilliantly shot by Christopher Doyle, but just didn't like it. I couldn't get on the wavelength of the characters, which I think is the hook that the entire film hangs, really.
I think the last Kar-wai film I watched was My Blueberry Night, which I watched for Pop Screen, a new podcast from the Geek Show chronicling movies either starring by or about pop stars. And I didn't have that problem with Chungking Express, but I did have that problem with My Blueberry Night. And I think I wonder if maybe the thing is that once the sort of spell of it slips, once you stop being kind of enchanted by the mood and the style, once you actually look at Wong Kar-wai's characters, there's some right assholes there. There's some very annoying people in his movies.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the guy at the beginning who keeps on going on about a girl that dumped him a month ago, I said, come on, you're being a creepy stalker now. And that's the sort of level it's pitched at, I think, which kind of took me out of it. Other movies I've watched, don't need to watch this ever again. I could talk about it for about an hour in my sleep. Tremors.
Oh, right.
I don't know what the sort of cultural reaction or perception is to this one, but genuinely it's just a movie which I could watch 100 times over and never fall out of love with, because it's just fun. It's a fun creature feature. It's probably the reason why I like creature feature movies, I'll be honest.
It doesn't get the same kind of relevance as like your Ghostbusters or anything, reverence, as like a Ghostbusters or something like that, but it certainly feels like it should.
It's pitched at the same sort of level, sort of like very laddish. Not laddish, that's a horrible term. Why did I say that? Very sort of buddy comedy. With Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, just the chemistry is through the roof. The creatures are amazing. It's got what's he called, the weird Chinese guy who was in everything in the 1990s, Victor Wong. He was also in what was it? Big Trouble in Little China. He's in a lot of movies, just playing sort of a hyper energetic Chinese guy who's always got guns for some reason. It was weird. It was the 90s. But yeah, it's a comfort movie for me. And yeah, I mean, it might be trashy, it might be silly, it might have more sequels than it ever should have had. I think it's at 5 now. And there was a TV series, which is milking it about as dry as you can possibly get. I think they've milked it of all of its ideas after the second one, honestly. But the first one, it's pure 90s gold, I think, honestly. And also I finished watching Van Helsing on Netflix, which was good for 4 seasons, and then it turned into an anime. Which
never seen it.
I'm not saying that as a... Well, it's about vampires. It turns Dracula into a woman. It suggests that her power is sort of like a mystical dark energy called the Dark One. Vanessa Van Helsing is the lead character who bites vampires and they become human. It's got all of these things going on, which sort of like wild deviations from the vampire format. And then at the end of the series 5, she's got like electric stuff coming out of her hands and telekinetic powers and sort of weird anime shit.
Okay.
And I've never seen a series sort of crap itself so comprehensively in the final season as this.
Yes.
Which stems the breaks, I guess, isn't it?
Them's the breaks, yeah.
Anything else? Anybody who's got anything to mention? Any final throws out there?
Just seen that A24, and Graham, you'll understand this, straight from the desk of Deirdre Beaubeardre, Auditor of the Month, trophy candle.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Handmade trophy candle. There you go.
Crafted by artisans.
Yeah. I'm glad you said artisans there. I heard the start of that and wasn't sure where you were going.
Okay, so for episode 1 of season 2 of Directors Uncut, that is it. So, Graham, where else can we find you and your stuff on the internet?
Well, more straightforwardly, I'm on Letterboxd. Just search for Graham Williamson, and Twitter and Instagram at Graham W Film. I do also run Pop Screen, a podcast from the Geek Show, where we cover movies about pop stars. And I write for the Geek Show, Horrified, and I've just started, as we record this, I've just had my first piece put up on We Are Cult.
Excellent. Andy?
Find me at Where Is Nowhere, the Road to Nowhere podcast, where we cover comic book, sci-fi and horror movies. Also, we've got a kind of subcategory, direct to nowhere, which we get a guest on to discuss a favourite director of theirs and 3 other movies. You can find me personal Twitter at Nowhere Andy. That's pretty much it. Then we also have an Instagram. I don't run that, so I don't know what that's called, but Road to Nowhere Instagram, but it's somewhere.
Excellent. Check all of those things out. But until the next episode, I am Rob, and this was Directors Uncut.